Alright, Flippy 2. This is video 3 on the ideas that were in the C.S. Lewis videos. I wanted to talk a bit more about the imagination and about poetry and about this idea of joy being a desire rather than a desire satisfied, which I think is, well, I was about to go off into a whole thing about pleasure, but pleasure's different. Pleasure kind of dies, you know, once it's achieved. But joy doesn't, I don't think. And also this sort of assumption, I guess I don't want to call it a proposition, that an intense innate desire always corresponds to an existing object. The example they give is that if there's hunger, then there must be food, or if there's thirst, there must be water. If there is, well, that's the best example. And then the next move is to say, well, if there's an intense innate desire for something beyond the world, then there must exist something beyond the world. It's an interesting proposition. But let me go back to imagination and poetry. I talked about this briefly in a couple other videos, but what is the imagination? I don't know. Of course, I don't know anything. I kind of go with Plato on this. You know, the more I learn, the more I learn that I know nothing at all. The more I know nothing at all. But I mean, if we look at the word, it's got the word image in it, and I used to really think that our imagination was our visual imagination until I read Wittgenstein's book, Remarks on Color, in which he points out that there are limits to our visual imagination. For instance, I can imagine a blue transparent glass. I can look through the blue transparent glass and I can see a clear image on the other side, you know, or a transparent red glass. But if I attempt to imagine a transparent white glass, I can't do it. White is opaque. The most you can maybe get is sort of a translucent white, where some light is coming through, but whatever image is on the other side is not going to come through clearly. It's going to suffer. So transparent white cannot be imagined. At least I can't imagine it. Yet, and here's my next thought on that blew me away, because that sort of leads me to believe that there are sort of natural limits on the visual imagination, that our visual imagination, what we can visualize, is dictated by nature, you know, and by our experience of nature. Well, I was just going to say, what would real imagination be to me? Real imagination to me is if I could visualize a color, a new color, an absolutely new color that is not in the spectrum of red to violet. You know, that would be real imagination to me, and that's never happened. Maybe we can develop that. I don't know. You know. In any event, but here's a curious part about the imagination. The words, I cannot visualize transparent white, but the words transparent white, I understand the concept. The concept is clear to me. I just can't visualize it. And for me, poetry can do a lot of this. You can use words, and it operates off this other type of imagination. I don't know whether we want to call it verbal imagination. I'm really not sure. But to me, some of the best poetry is poetry that uses words to actually go beyond language, or to point beyond language. And in writing that kind of poetry, I experience an intense, sort of an intense anticipation. It's not really pleasurable. It's a tension. It's joy. I would say it's joyous. It's fraught with a sort of tension. I guess you'd call that creative tension, though I don't think we really create anything. I mean, I think we assemble things, we invent things. I don't know if we really do any true creation, though we call it creativity. But it's like reaching for something you can't really obtain and getting closer and closer to it. It's almost a sense of intrigue, intense intrigue. And I don't think you really achieve the object, but I think a good poem of this sort is fraught with all kinds of meanings that you can't really expostulate. You know, you can't really render them prosaic. They affect you. They take you somewhere. You can't really articulate, because in a sense you've gone beyond language, I think, but you can't really articulate where you've been. There is it's a form of pleasure, but it's a sense of awe. It creates a sense of awe. You sort of become, in a sense, ecstasy. You're moved outside yourself. Now, the danger with words, of course, is that they can refer to things that don't exist. They can be ambiguous. They can, we can very quickly enter into error and confusion with words, which is why we argue about words so much and talk about words so much and question words so much and have to evaluate them and define them. Now, so segueing this into the other question about desire and joy, if I'm experiencing a certain joy towards reaching towards something that is not in the language, something that is I'm reaching for that's outside language, does that mean that this thing outside language actually exists, because it corresponds to some joy of mine or desire of mine or reaching of mine? Am I really reaching for something that exists? I don't know. I really don't know. This question about innate desire, certain innate desires come from nature. I mean, yes, if we have hunger, well, it's difficult to analyze this. It's reasonable to assume that if we have hunger, there's such a thing as food, but then we know that food exists. We know there's a correspondence there. When it comes to something like a deep innate desire for something beyond the world, it's difficult to assess this comment. I mean, or this statement. How do we know if something's beyond the world? Is it an innate desire that's common to all people? I mean, some people are very content leading very mundane lives. Doesn't occur to them to think of anything beyond the world or beyond even their small sphere, and all our spheres are small. So I don't know. And plus, this sort of desire, does this spring from nature? I mean, is this really comparable to a natural desire for food? If this is a desire for something beyond the world, something supernatural, would it spring from the supernatural and not from the world, not from nature? So I don't really. I understand the proposition, that if there is an intense, innate desire, it must correspond to something existing, and if there's an innate desire for something beyond the world, then there must exist something beyond the world. But I understand the proposition using my imagination, but I can't subscribe to it. It just doesn't strike me individually as true. Necessarily true. It may be true, I don't know. But it doesn't strike me as necessarily true. But it's an interesting proposition in sort of the chain of reasoning in these videos, So that's kind of the story there. I don't know. It's all very, very difficult to articulate these things. How do you articulate the ineffable? Or that sounds real mystical, huh? Articulate the ineffable, which by definition is not articulable. That's, I think, what I have to say about that. Just running a bunch of ideas. Wish I had a better word than joy. I mean, ecstasy is probably a better thing to describe it. Ecstasy seems too strong a word. I like the creative tension, sort of fraught with creative tension, a sort of reaching out beyond language, and this sort of feeling like you're on the verge of being able to articulate something that is not really in the language. I think that's sort of what I've been trying to describe. That's the story. Talk to you later, Philippi. Bye-bye.